park ranger discovers a swamp filled with dozens of abandoned boats. But what he finds inside makes him urgently call 911. Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The morning air hung heavy with humidity, thick enough to cling to the skin like invisible film. The sun had barely cleared the cypress crowns when Michael Jenkins eased his aluminum skiff away from the ranger dock. The motor hummed low, a vibration he could feel in his chest, steady and dependable, the kind of sound he trusted more than most voices he heard back at headquarters. Behind him, the buildings of the Park Service compound grew smaller, half hidden by the mist that never really left this part of Louisiana. The wetlands were waking slowly, exhaling their breath into the sky, and he felt the familiar pull of solitude that came with every patrol. He had been a park ranger for almost 15 years, and before that, a fisherman's son who'd grown up in these same labyrinths of green water and hanging moss. He knew the moods of the swamp the way a farmer knows his soil, when it was resting, when it was angry, when it was hiding something. The storm 2 weeks ago had been the worst in a decade. Trees uprooted, docks splintered, the shoreline redrawn in places where the water had simply claimed more land. The Park Service had sent out small teams to assess damage and catalog debris, but certain areas had been left for last. Those were the quiet zones, low-lying sectors near the southern border that were officially marked as unstable due to shifting silt and the chance of sinkholes. Michael knew that the term was bureaucratic camouflage. Unstable often meant unexplained, and unexplained things had a way of staying off the books. His assignment was simple in theory: inspect the perimeter of the restricted sector known as Bay 14, photograph damage, note any hazards, and return before dusk. But the coordinates given to him were deep inside a region where the channels twisted into dead ends and where GPS signals flickered out without warning. Most rangers avoided it whenever they could, claiming their equipment failed there, or that the fog never lifted. Michael didn't believe in superstition, but he did believe in patterns, and too many reports from Bay 14 ended the same way, with blank sections and logbooks and missing timestamps and tracking records. He checked his supplies one more time. 2 sealed cameras, 1 GPS unit, a laminated notebook with waterproof pages, a box of flare markers, a small sample kit for water testing, and a thermos of black coffee that was already losing its heat. Everything in its place. He'd learned long ago that discipline was the difference between a ranger and a search subject. When he'd finished his checklist, he turned the throttle slightly, and the boat glided forward into the narrow throat of the canal that led south. The swamp swallowed him within minutes. The air grew thicker, the light dimmer, filtered through the lace of Spanish moss that hung from the trees like the curtains of a forgotten house. Cicadas screamed from somewhere unseen, then fell silent all at once, leaving only the lap of the motor's wake against the roots. Michael's eyes moved constantly, left, right, scanning the water, the banks, the reflection of the sky on the oily surface. He wasn't looking for danger exactly. Habit made him observant even when there was nothing to fear. Every ripple told a story: a turtle slipping off a log, a snake crossing the channel, an alligator drifting beneath the surface. Life here was written in small movements, and he had learned to read them all. The further south he went, the more the signs of the storm became obvious. Piles of broken branches, whole trees leaning at awkward angles, chunks of dock planking tangled in vines. The smell was sharp and metallic, a mix of salt, silt, and something like old batteries. When he leaned close to the water, he caught a faint rainbow sheen spreading from the touch of his paddle. It wasn't fuel, at least not fresh fuel, but some kind of residue, the kind that seeps up from below rather than spills from above. He made a note of it in his logbook. Oily film, surface, not organic. An hour passed. The channel widened, splitting into 3 smaller arteries. He cut the motor and let the boat drift, listening. Silence in a swamp was never total, but this was close. No birds, no frogs, no splash of feeding fish. Even the insects seemed to have retreated. He looked down and saw his reflection wavering on the dark surface, the brim of his hat bent by years of sun, the sweat already beading on his forehead. A thin mist hovered just above the water line, swirling in slow, deliberate circles. He marked a red tag on a low branch to orient his return and chose the middle path. The water here was denser, opaque, the kind that hid its depth. The boat's bow nudged through mats of duckweed and broken reeds, and every few feet the motor struck something soft beneath the surface, a log, maybe, or sediment drift. He thought about switching to paddles to avoid noise, but the air was too still, the heat pressing down like a weight on his shoulders. He needed the hum of the motor, the proof that something mechanical still worked in a place that seemed designed to erase man's presence. He reached for his GPS unit. The screen pulsed weakly, then froze. Coordinates vanished, replaced by a blinking error message. He frowned and tapped the device. Nothing. He turned it off and back on again. Still nothing. The signal light flashed red twice, then died completely. He muttered under his breath, but the sound was lost in the vastness around him. No satellite link meant no accurate log of his position, something his supervisors would frown upon. He would have to rely on landmarks and his own sense of direction, which was usually enough. Up ahead, a shape broke the monotony of green and brown. It was the remains of an old dock, half submerged, its pylons eaten by rot and barnacle. A faded warning sign leaned at an angle, the letters almost unreadable beneath algae. He maneuvered closer, careful not to hit the protruding beams, and used the paddle to test the water depth, less than 3 feet. The smell intensified, a sour mixture of rust, fuel, and decomposed vegetation. He recorded another note, took a few photographs, and zoomed in on something glinting beneath the surface near the dock's edge. For a moment, he thought it was glass, but the shape was wrong. It was rounded, metallic, too deliberate to be natural debris. He extended the paddle again, trying to dislodge it, but the water was thick with mud. Whatever it wasn't going anywhere. He leaned forward, snapping a picture, and then felt the boat tilt slightly. The movement startled him more than it should have. He regained balance and straightened up, scanning the trees. No wind. The branches hung motionless. He exhaled slowly and started the motor again, backing away from the structure. There would be time later to check the coordinates when he got signal. For now, he needed to reach the center of the zone before noon if he wanted daylight on the return trip. The channel narrowed again, twisting into a corridor of trees so close that the branches brushed his shoulders as he passed. Shadows pooled in the bends, and the air grew colder despite the heat. He noticed something else. The absence of wildlife had become total. The swamp had gone hollow, as if drained of its heartbeat. Even the insects that had been plaguing him at the start of the journey had vanished. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was watchful. Michael had lived through enough storms and backwater patrols to know when nature was holding its breath. It happened before a hurricane, sometimes before a fire. But this felt different. It wasn't anticipation of danger. It was avoidance, the way animals vanish from a place they've learned to fear. He adjusted his cap, squinting at the water line. There was movement. just a ripple, faint, 50 feet ahead.